For the next 45, 50 minutes or whatever it takes, I'm going to share with you what I know about the greatest show on earth. What I know about the greatest show on earth, I can replicate on that board there. I've been studying family businesses for the last 20 years. I've been involved with family businesses since I was the age of 11. And as I master my craft, if you like, I actually am able to take the complex and make it simple, make it digestible, make it so that you can educate others. And my aim, my goal this afternoon is for you to leave this auditorium with an ability to educate other people who may be in your ecosystem, who may be interested in some of this knowledge. Please come in. Yeah. Okay. It was the wrong one. But what I do and what I've been able to do in the book, the various publications I have, I replicate anything I talk about, the complex, I simplify it and am able to put it on a coaster. I develop it into a framework so that you can replicate what it is on a napkin or a coaster. And the reason I say this is because learning opportunities or education opportunities will happen at the most inopportune time. Whether it's a father, an uncle, a brother, a sister, a cousin, an executive, an employee, a boss, it may be that you're interested in passing on some of this information to them. It could be a dinner tonight, breakfast in the morning, coffee tomorrow afternoon. It could be a time where you say, gosh, I heard this guy talk and he made it so simple. I'll show you. And you just pull out one of these frameworks, grab a coaster, because the last thing you want to do at that point in time is grab your laptop and look for a PowerPoint presentation. That just doesn't cut it. So think of it like this, to say this is an efficient and effective way to have complex conversations. And that's what it is. So let me do that. Let me encourage you to be educators. And my role is to educate educators, so that then you can go on and talk to your sister about some of these things when you're grappling with your grandfather or grandmother, so that you can grab something out there and say, let's make it a little bit simple. Let's not make it as daunting. So that's what I do. The way I do that, you can see, is that I start off with this. And in this here, yes, I call it the greatest show on earth because it is the most fascinating of all the social sciences. That you are studying businesses, but you're all studying the families that own those businesses and the ownership structures of those businesses. So when you bring those three things together, it's much more complex, much more challenging, much more interesting to actually study that as a student, as a manager, as an executive, as an owner, as a family member, and as a business operator. But here, when we look about family business, that to me in and of itself doesn't really press my buttons. I go, oh, it's family business. And a lot of people go, that's not very interesting. Watch what I do. What just happened? You guys.
Well, I think he's more adequate for this because he has a family.
Doesn't matter. That's why I'm asking you. What just happened? What happened when I did that?
The context changed.
The context changed, didn't it? The focus changed. What did it change from?
From family business, from a family in a business.
It changed from? Wow, wasn't that clever? You start to think about what's different about this space. You grab that word and threw it in there, and what did we do? We flipped the conversation. Oh, this is an interesting space. Now, all of you, you're a member of a family, aren't you? Can't get away with it anymore, can you? So we're starting to change the focus into something that is increasingly complex, isn't it? You know how complex your family is, and I don't even know them. but I'm pretty sure they're complicated. We're all from complex family systems. And then we start to flip it around. So even to have that conversation, I've opened up to you. I can see it in your eyes. I can see, well, I've got your attention. And if you're sitting there with your grandfather who doesn't want to talk about family business, okay, grab that word and flip the conversation. He'll want to talk about family. Okay, he will understand that. Or it could be someone else. It could be your banker, your financier, who's there struggling to understand this complex space. And you might flip him by, it's complicated. I'll show you. You look at us as a family business. We look at us as a family in business. Or there's another way to do it. Put that word in front of that word. And what does that look like? Forget that and flip them around. And what do you get? We are a business family. We do business. If our parents were doctors, we would probably be, what would the conversation be about since you were small? Hospitals, patients, medical systems, drugs. But we're a business family. We talk about business. If we were academics, professors, government people, lawyers, we're a lawyer family. Huh? That's what we've done. No, we do business. That's what our family does. Now I get to you. So you start to think about, well, that's what we've done. Our family does business. We're a family in business, sir.
That's very interesting because when I was 22 years old, I told my father, I don't want to work with my older brother. He's too greedy. So,
Yeah, hang on, there's more. If you thought that was interesting, wait till what I come up with next. But you start to see how you break down a complex conversation and say, okay, here, this is what we're looking at. So let me just get rid of that one. Now, love these three boards. Just so happens that there's three. Family, business, owners. But let's see. Here, anywhere in the world that you go to attend a forum such as this, you'll be introduced to this diagram, a Venn diagram, introduced by John Davis and his Ph.D. supervisor in the mid-80s. It's been around for a while. It has paradigm consensus. So that means that it's accepted in conversations. So I use it. When I went to Kellogg, I was struggling to find out what am I going to do to add value to John Ward's massive body of work. And I struggled. But then it dawned on me that I don't need to introduce something new. I just need to revisit some of the seminal work and make it more digestible, usable, revisit it. And that's what I'm going to do now. Because here, when it was first introduced, you were looking at three circles or three systems. An owner's system, a family system, and a business system. Now, with my mentor, Ken Moores, he said to me, there's a little bit something wrong with that from a social science point of view. Now, because you're looking at this, you've got to look at the same level of analysis. Owners, they're people. Family, they're people. But businesses are entities. So what I encourage you to do in the writings that I write, I don't talk about the business. You'll see why in a moment. I talk about people, managers. Managers who manage on behalf of the owners and the family. So these three systems are all people. So let me just get that out of the road and say, this is one way to make the complex ecosystem of a business family simple. And believe me, it'll fit on the back of a coaster. Starts it off. So let's look at three systems. an ownership system, a family system, and a manager's system, all people. Okay? Now let's then look at them individually. So start with the owners. What I do here is I draw a continuum, because in the owner's circle or the owner's system, it's evolving. Across generations, it transitions. Or, as my learned friend here said before, in his system, there was utility heterogeneity. He didn't say it like that, but he shared with you that there was someone else in that system who had different aspirations than what you did. You put it a little bit more eloquently. But what you were saying and shared with the people here, that when I was 22, I looked at someone else in the potential owner's system and said, they want different things out of this involvement than what I do. The way I interpreted that is that on this continuum, you have at one end a dollar sign. He or she is pecuniary. It's what they want. They want a dividend. You said it another way. And at the other end, you have a heart, that you have psychological ownership. And I would hazard to suggest that you were sort of down this end somewhere, and that your sibling was hanging out at this end. Not right or wrong, it's just the reality of it. We're different. We might be the same parents, but we want different things at this stage of our lives. So when you look at the owner's system, understand that there's increasingly numerical number of people who are owning this business across generations, but also that there'll be diversity. My cousin may be hanging out down here because she wants a dividend. She doesn't want to work in the business. She is just there to take it. My other cousin just feels for the business with a passion. It gives her the closeness to our grandparents, and that's how I feel. So the owners are different. Not right or wrong. It's not for you to judge, but for you to say, that's the way it is. There is utility. The utility, what they receive from their being an owner, will be different. And it will change over their life cycle. At 22, 23, 24, you just want to see some cash in the kick. You just want to see a fast car driving down the freeway. You want to see all of those shiny objects and impress your bride-to-be with the pool that you've got in your backyard. That's interesting. But over time, fast forward a couple of years and you start to say, wow, that's not what counts. What counts is the legacy of this business, to pass it on to generations. It's to steward this across generations. It's a different feeling. So how do we start to understand where different people are on their life cycle journey, and we accommodate the different perspectives? So what we've done there is taken the ownership circle and look at it in more detail. Fascinating. It's in flux, it's changing, it's evolving. We're getting more owners, we're losing a couple of owners, we're transitioning, but it's moving, it's vibrant, it's inevitable that it will need to change. And then if I look at the family system, the way I like to look at that is that we evolve into I turn it into a Dalmatian. I give it a couple of dots. We evolve into a family of families. What started as mum and dad, watch what I do here. I hope that's blank. Voila. What started as mum and dad, as a first generation business, look at that. They had 4 kids. Okay, 2 became 6. What happened then? These four got married. 6 became 10 because we got these married ins. Ooh, scary. And then we go, that became 10. And what happened here? Well, these had 2 each. Okay, so you've got this 3rd generation. So 2 became 6, became 10, became plus another 14. And what happened then? Oh, there was a divorce. It'll happen. It'll happen. Okay, so it goes back to 13. But then there's another marriage in. It gets complicated. Think of your family. It evolves. There's a family of families. And if you sit back there and do the math on your watch, predict it out, what you're managing now, there's a group of 10. Some of you in the room, you'll be around for the next 50 years, it will be 60, just by constant evolution. So here, just by being conscious that this is also changing, we're evolving into a family of families. And what do we know about families? They're complicated. As soon as the core business, that 2 plus 4, the 6 that was socialised in the same house, and you go and get married to that girl who liked that car that you were driving, she comes in there. Now, you've got another family, you've got your own family, plus your in-laws, plus your kids. So your priorities are changing. But you and your brother were socialised in the same house. Your brother and you were like that. Your sister-in-law can't stand the sight of you. Huh? Good luck with that one, bro. And you start to think it's complicated. You're still like thick as anything with your brother because you shared the same room as kids, the same bathroom. Now you're in your own house. There's a changing dynamic. But it's not abnormal. It's normal for you to start to understand in this business owning family, it will change. It will evolve. So here, I move to the managers. Managers managing on behalf of the family and owners. What do they manage? In the early days, it was pretty simple. Granddad, you had it easy. Don't tell that to his face, but it was a lot simpler than it is now. There was one corner store. There was one manufacturing outlet. You had a series of customers who you looked after, and you built your reputation and you built your wealth. Over time, the business grew. You had a place here in Monterrey, and then you moved to the big smoke and you went to Mexico City, so we got, and then you bought another company, it got complicated. So what evolved over time because of your reputation and your success and your quality and your service, we got bigger. The commercial activities expanded. With that came different responsibilities. It became harder to manage in different areas. It also meant that we picked up real estate assets. So we start to say, well, what are we managing? What are the commercial activities that we are now going to be managing? Not management necessary, but understanding. You don't even have to work in the business to make sure that you are managing or understanding what it is that needs to be managed by people. So there's the legacy asset, the core business, the cash cow, the real thing that we're known for. There's that. And then there's some real estate assets. There's some shared investments with other cash. No? We've got to manage the cash. There's some stock, there's some bonds or whatever, there's our reputation, the intangibles, which gives us our competitive advantage. There's our philanthropic activities in society. So here, I'm giving you a laundry list of
the way that that has evolved on your watch. Started pretty small, Granddad, it was great. Then it got bigger. Now what is going to be managed when it's my turn or the next generation's turn is immeasurably more complex than it was before, going into changing technologies and competition and global You know what I'm saying? It's changing. So if I step back from those and think, wow, that's allowed me a bigger picture, a bigger canvas to work on, to understand the complexity of the field, the fascinating field, the intriguing field of business owning families, the greatest show on earth. Then I start to think, well, if it's in flux, what do I need to do? How do I grab a hold of this thing and understand it? How do I make sure it doesn't collapse? Well, what we do, we understand that between each of these circles, where they intersect, where they overlap, there's potential for tension between the managers and the owners. If the managers don't know what the owners want, there's going to be conflict. If they're not aligned, there's going to be the potential for disruption. So what do we need to minimize the tension between the managers and owners? We need a plan. We need a plan. Okay? Pretty simple. You can have this conversation at home tonight. As you draw the three circles, start to think, wow, that's dynamic. And it can be full of friction and full of tension if there's misalignment. So let's align the people. So how are we going to do that? We need a plan. What sort of plan do we need? It's pretty simple. We need a strategic plan to make sure we know where we are, we know where we're heading, know how we're going to get there. Simple as that. So that the managers know how to manage consistent with the expectation of the owners. Let's get together. There's no point in us thinking you want this when actually you want that. We're never going to get to the same destination. I'm going to end up in California, you're going to end up in Peru, and we're going to wonder why we didn't come together. We didn't align. We need a plan. So that's going to reduce the tension because I'm going to be suspicious of you if I don't know what you're doing and you don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what the expectations are. I've never asked. So we need a plan. So again, you start to see, let's reduce the tension. Here, between the owners and the family, again, using that same approach, there's going to be the potential for friction between the owners and the family if we're not planning to pass down ownership to the next generation of family. There is potential for disruption. So what do we need? To reduce the tension between the owners and the family. What do we need? We need a plan. Never say the word succession. We need a plan. We say continuity. We need a plan. What sort of plan do we need? We need an estate, wealth, and asset plan to transfer these assets in an equitable and tax-efficient way. We need to plan for the inevitability that this is going to happen. I've not yet met the person who's lived forever. I know a lot of entrepreneurs who think, they actually say to me, if I die, not when I die, if I die, they don't think they're going to die. They think that this is just going to go on. So we need to understand that let's plan for this. And if you have a problem working with entrepreneurs who say, I don't need to do that, there's one thing that I like to do. If you don't do it, the lawyers will get your money. Oh, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? Quick! The lawyers aren't going to get it. What do I need? We need a plan. We need a plan. An estate, wealth, and asset plan. So we reduce the potential for disruption and we have alignment. Here, you know where I'm going. To reduce the tension and prepare family members for their role as managers to manage on behalf of the owners and the family. What are we going to do? Or what are we going to need? We need a plan. You're getting the hang of this. We need a plan. What sort of plan do we need? A talent development plan to prepare the family members for their increasingly complex role of managing this portfolio of commercial activities that used to be pretty simple. But now, I got to know what I'm managing here and how I can best prepare to be set up for success. So we need to develop the talent. They don't have to be management, remember? They don't even have to work in the business, remember? But they do have that expectation that they will be managing on behalf of their generation so they can perhaps pass it on to the next generation. Let's set them up for success by giving them the required talent to actually do that job at the best possible way they can. So we need a strategic plan to reduce that tension, a state wealth and asset plan to reduce that tension, a talent development plan to reduce that tension, and there's one more, because in the middle of those three circles, this little humdinger here, there is the potential for tension. So what do we need to reduce the potential for tension? We need a plan. You need a bigger plan. You need a governance plan. You need to govern the ownership group, govern the operating entities, and govern the family. So simple. 3 circles, 4 plans. Should I drop the microphone now? Think of it like that, to take a vast amount of knowledge, to make a vast, big conversation, to start the conversation with your family members. Or if you've got the privilege to work with a family business or a business owning family in an executive role when you graduate, or if you're in a bank, financing, being the support or a trusted advisor, you need to understand this. That is complex, fascinating, intriguing, and great. I'll bring the coaster, because you can actually, any one of you could say, okay, I got that. I can do this at home. I want you to tattoo that on the inside of your eyelids. That's how important it is. And I got plenty of these. So if you start to think about, see, we haven't got time to go through all these, but when you're making the complex simple, that's the way you need to do it. And not only in this context, in others. I'll give you another one. And this one is the stickiest. Right? It's a pretty scientific word, sticky. In here, my mate and mentor, Ken Morse, studied leaders of family businesses, and he wrote a 282-page book. I actually read the book. I was a research assistant on the book. But I knew that I could encourage you to engage in that conversation with a theoretical book without actually making it replicable. So I turned it into a coaster. His framework that he introduced, or his approach, he called the 4 L's. Academics like using letters of the alphabet and then putting a number in front of them. But this is so sticky that wherever I go and run into former students, they say to me, I remember the 4 L's. Other people who aren't even in family business say, I use the 4 L's, but it's not for a family business context. That's how useful it is. People say to me, well, can it be used if you're not working in the business? Because Ken's research looked at people who are going to join the business. I said, of course it can. For governors, for directors, board members, watch what I do. Now here, I'll tell you, it's based on life cycle theory, life cycle of the individual, and learning theory. So what these 4 L's represent are the evolution of an individual across their life cycle. That Ken found that they go through 4 predictive stages. I haven't got time to go into it in detail, but I'll give it to you what they are. The first stage is that they learn business. Learn business. Now, if you've been part of a family business, and many of you in the room are, you started learning business when your ears started to work. Look at you. Yeah? They've not talked about anything at the dinner table since I was that small. It's business. If you're part of a medical family, the conversation would have been about patients, hospitals, nurses, doctors, uniforms, antibiotics, blah, 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 blah. But no, you're part of a business family. So all we've talked about is business since before you were 22, since you were 2. So you start to think about, you learn business from a very early age. And then as soon as you're old enough, you got jobs in the business. You worked after school in the business. You worked in school holidays in the business. You've done on weekends. You've had every grubby, dirty job that no one else has done in your business. You've licked stamps, you've washed windows, you've swept floors, you've done everything. So you know what business is about, sort of. So you've got this practical exposure of the complexities of business. The weekend you had barbecues, who's there? Dad's customers. Oh, boring. But you go, who's coming to the barbecue? The banker, be behaved. Oh, no. But that's all about the business ecosystem that you're part of. And then, so you had practical. And then, more often than not in this generation, you're sent off to a place like this to get some theoretical exposure, to get a business degree, or get another sort of degree, or get some education that includes some business exposure. You get a theoretical understanding, oh, that's how it works, on broader businesses than just your own. As you evolve, as you graduate, best practice will suggest, don't come back into the business. And people say to me, and they often say to me, I got to come back into the business. I say, well, I'll tell you why they shouldn't come back into the business, because anyone I talk to, I ask them, what are your 2 main regrets? Well, only 2? I said, yeah, 2. And they say, one is that I didn't work outside the business. Okay? The second one is that I didn't work long enough outside the family business. And the other reason to not go straight back into the business is because you've got to make mistakes on other people's money. I don't want you here, go and make some mistakes on other people's coin. Get out there and build your own reputation. Know what it's like to not work for your dad, your uncle, your auntie, your grandmother, Know what it's like to be you. Not the son, daughter, grandson, nephew, niece of someone else who's got a huge profile. So you start to think, that makes sense. Now, if you're wedded to the fact that, I'm going back into the business, I'll tell you what to do. Find 3 people who think it's a good idea, and find 3 people who don't think it's a good idea, and make your own decision. I'm pretty sure if you pick the right 3 people on both sides, you'll come up with a balanced decision. Of course, there's reasons why you might have to challenge that. But here, so when after a while that you've worked at Procter & Gamble or Hewlett-Packard or whoever you wanted to work for, you've built your reputation, you said, well, I want to come back into the business. Well, if there's a position for you, maybe you compete for that position. But you'll only get that interview if you've built some sort of credible profile, that you're competitive in the marketplace. Think strategically about your career. As one father said to his daughter, sweetheart, a role in the business is an option. And we'd love you to join the business. but it's not the only option. Anyone who hangs with me for any point in time, I say, create options. The only reason I'm standing here in Monterrey in Mexico, coming all the way from a small town in Dalby in Queensland, Australia, because I created options. I didn't lock into one lane, I created options. Think about how you're creating options. So here, let me get to this second L. You've got to learn your family business. Learn our family business. You think that you know a lot about your family business because you had that afternoon job, you had that internship, you had that week vacation job there. You've heard the conversations coming up. I guarantee you don't know much about the family business. You don't. You've been protected from the real challenges. Your parents have protected you from. You didn't know when they couldn't meet payroll, if that was the case. The challenges with unions, suppliers, customers, executives when they leave with all your intellectual property. You don't know any of that stuff. So you start to think, you've got to learn our family business. And here's the sentence that Ken so eloquently crafted, and I love it, and I repeat it every chance I get. In this second L, regardless if you are working in the business or you're starting to develop into a potential director or an owner or a governor, you have to learn the value of values. You have to keep the philosophies of the incumbent and previous generation, but not the detail, in order to continue differently. Because what got you here, and all of those great philosophies of your father and uncle and auntie, is not going to get you there. We've already said it's more complicated. You've got a big portfolio of commercial activities. We've got competitors that you never had, that we don't know. We've got technology that hasn't been invented. When it was invented yesterday, we've got to actually keep up. We've got a changing landscape. Think about it again. What sets us apart? It's our values. Why don't we do business with us? Why have those customers stayed loyal? Why have those executives stuck with us through thick and thin, through pandemic and crisis and government changes? It's because of our values. We have to understand the value of those values and appreciate them. And we have to understand your philosophies, how your generation has made decisions. Get those philosophies, but not the detail. Understand them, interpret them, institutionalize them in order to continue differently. We're going into uncharted waters, just like they did maybe a generation ago when they founded the business. They didn't know, they made it up. It's changed and will continue to change. So here in this second quadrant, it's the most important quadrant. In this quadrant, I want you to get profit responsibility. I don't want you to think you really know what's going on by managing a budget, because trained monkeys can manage a budget. Here is when you've got to get dirty and be responsible for something, whether it's a new product, a new initiative, something that's going to deliver profit. Because as you evolve over here, inevitably, when you learn to lead, either in an operational role or a governance role, what are you going to be responsible for? Delivering profit. So do it as part of your apprenticeship. Hang over here as long as you want. Find out as much as you can under the cover of the incumbent generation. Stay there. If I find any of you rush over in here and think it's sexy and easy, I will come and get you and grab you by the collar and bring you way the heck. Get back there. You're not ready. Don't set your sons and daughters up for failure. Don't rush them into this, because leadership is tough. You know that, you know that, you know that. I'm picking on you guys because you know how hard it is. Every time you've made a decision on your watch, you've pissed somebody off. Well, excuse my language. You've actually upset somebody. That's lonely. That is a lonely place to be. Cut your teeth over here. Get profit responsibility. Trim the tree. If you've got some assets there, make sure you maybe get rid of them. Tidy up the balance sheet. Get rid of some joint venture partners. Make sure that by the time you get over here, you are a leader. You're not worrying about putting fires out. Here's the best way that someone told me about it when they saw me do this. They said, that is so clear. My father and my uncles, they come to work and they're like fire engine drivers. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, it feels like they come to work and put on a fire engine suit and they jump in the fire engine and they run around looking for fires to put out. They're busy. They're busy putting fires out. I don't want them. I don't want to be a fire engine driver. I want to come to you and make sure the fires are put out in advance. It was the best way I've seen it. I said, oh gosh, I want to come to work and enjoy work. So here, this is the hardest of the quadrants. I said that's the most important. This is the hardest, to learn to let go. Let's not sugarcoat it. Let's admit to the incumbent generation, this is tough. This is your life's work. And they will feel, well, gosh, don't I have any worth anymore? You don't want me anymore? Wrong. We want to secure that institutional memory. We want to make sure that, but they do have to learn to let go. They've educated you, they've exposed you, they've mentored you, they've prepared you to come through this, and you don't all want to end up in here. Right now I can see you looking at your own family's ecosystems and say, oh gosh, if only Grandad would move over there. He's 102, still comes to work every day. I know those 102-year-olds. Right. Their legacy is how they prepare the next generation and how they have the prescience to move on. There's other things that they can do, and I could get to that if we had more time. But you start to think of the 4 L's of understanding the inevitability, understand where the roadblocks can be. By using a simple framework, you can bring people into the conversation and start to think about what you need to do to prepare yourself to let go. Well, I've got to start moving over here. And also prepare the next generation appropriately. What you may or may not have noticed when I drew this, there was a full line there, and there was a dashed line here, 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 and here. It's not that they are mutually, you never stop learning business. You're coming across there, going back there. You're coming in and out of here, but you're moving positively forward. And you're starting to learn to let go. Let me tell you the easiest way to have that conversation. This is brilliant. I'll do it on this one. A family leader in a large organisation set up as an entrepreneur with his brother. 2 brothers grew a business, 2 arms in storage and hire, national company. Andy, let's call him Andy, because that's his real name. He gets his family together, his brother, his sister-in-law, his wife, his kids, sons and daughters, daughters-in-laws, nieces and nephews. Gets in a room like this, there's probably enough to fill that there. And he says to them, I've got an announcement to make. Here he is, he's pioneered this company, launched this business, it's global, he's been at it for 50 years. And he says, at the end of the financial year, I'm moving to a 440. They all looked at him like you're looking at me. He's finally lost his marbles. What's he talking about now? Then he said,
After a period of 2 years, I'm going to move to a 330. You're still going to be paying me the same amount of money, but I just thought I'd fill you in on this. And so, silence, what's going on? Now, what he was doing there was quite cleverly making sure that he was learning to let go. Something that has been part of his life, something that has been more important to him than his own children, which you respect, or arguably more important to him. Something that he would like to see passed on to his grandchildren and his grandchildren's children. So he said, I need to learn to let go. How I'm going to do this is important to you. It's important to our employers, our employees, our executives. Our financiers are interested in what I'm going to do because they trust me. So he was saying here, I'm going to start working 4 days a week for 40 weeks of the year. I'm transitioning. And after a period of time, I'm going to cut that back to 3 days a week, to 30 weeks of the year, because I need to bring space for my sons and nephews who are very competent to actually come in. I'll still be around. And it's not that it's going to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, stop. It's the message. It's the signal that, yes, he is transitioning across here. My challenge to everybody is to take that lesson and say, how am I going to do that? We can talk about that, for an extended period. But when you think about the inevitability, your legacy as an incumbent, as someone who's built this business, your legacy is how you leave it. It's not about the widget or not about the cash in the bank. It's about the governance that you might have brought in to reduce the tension. Those 4 governance plans just drove you nuts for the last 10 years of your career. You forgot about what it was. It didn't matter. You started to focus on something and making sure there was the strongest foundation that the lawyers didn't get your money. So you understood that this was a good business when you started it. It's going to be a great business when I'm finished with it. And that's what you did in advance. Let me finish with this one thing. Because Andy was saying, when he presented that, he was admitting that everybody trusts me. There's one fundamental question that you need to keep top of mind, that all stakeholders in these 3 circles need to keep top of mind. One question: are we in good hands? Your executives are asking that question every day. Your suppliers are asking that question. Your executives, your financiers are asking, we're in good hands. We're in good hands while old mate's in charge. While he's sitting in that chair, I'm sleeping at night. I'm starting to get a little bit nervous. What's happening? Where's the cult? Where's that bloke with the shiny car and the flashy girlfriend? Oh, it's giving me the heebie-jeebies. So you start to think, are we in good hands? We are in good hands. And understanding that everybody's asking that constantly, all of the stakeholders. And that's why you put in these governance structures. That's why you have a strategic plan. That's why you have a talent development plan. That's why you have an estate wealth and asset plan, so the government's not going to get the money. That's why you do this planning. To answer one question, you can give me all the library books and all the textbooks and all the blah, 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 and all the research that I do and others do. It gets down to one thing. Are we in good hands? Here's another way to look at that. Do we trust those who are making decisions on our behalf? If we haven't got trust, we haven't got anything. So as students of this conversation, students of this institution, students of commerce, society, you'll understand it gets back to trust. So as social scientists, every single one of you, you start, I need to know more about trust. Nobody, they think they know about trust. I know a little bit about trust because I got curious. When I found out from my mentors to say, it gets down to trust, and they kept on saying trust. And I said, well, trust. What is it? So I go and look up all the literature and I can tell you what it is. This is fun. Think of someone you don't trust. Think of someone you don't trust. Okay, just do that while I do my little housework here. You're someone you don't trust. For the sake of the exercise, let's do it in a business setting. Someone you don't trust. Now I'm going to tell you why you don't trust them. Because the literature on trust, all those studies that I go and look at, there's 4 main dimensions of trust when they measure trust or trustworthiness. Yeah? And I look at it like that. The only way I can remember these things is I just make them simple so I can replicate them on a coaster. Oh, a coaster here that'll say, I'll tell you what it is. You can do this exercise when you go home. The reason you don't trust somebody, according to the literature or the science, has got something to do with these 4 dimensions. Integrity. You don't trust them because they don't have integrity. Ability. You don't trust them because they don't have the ability to deliver on what you said. Think about the people you work with. Benevolence. They're doing it for themselves, not for the collective. They're selfish rather than selfless. Benevolence. Consistency. Think about that person that I just asked you to think about. Now the reason, it could be a team member at work, it could be someone who you've worked on a project with in MBA class or whatever it may be. The reason that you don't trust that person, let's keep integrity constant. You wouldn't really be hanging with them and everything else would be moot if you didn't have integrity. So the reason you don't trust that person, they have a ton of ability. There's no doubting that. They're doing it for the collective. They are great. They're terrific people. If only they would deliver consistently. If only they would deliver that project on time, I would trust them more. So straight away, that person you would think, oh, that's why I don't trust her. She's no trouble with her ability, no trouble. She's a beautiful person, lovely, caring person, does it for the group. But I just can't rely on her. I just can't trust her to deliver. So she's not consistent. Or it could be, let's configure it differently if you're not happy with that description of that person that you had in mind. It could be, they're consistent. You say 6 o'clock, that says 6 o'clock. 1 minute to 6, she will have it ready. He will have it ready. Whatever. Consistent. On time, every time. No problem with consistency. Big C. Ability. Never been a problem with her ability. His ability. Great. Tick, tick. The reason I have that feeling in my waters is because they're doing it for themselves. You got it. A student. You start to think about, you start to think, well, I don't trust them, that they're doing it for us. They're not interested. And it may go back to the story of your example earlier. And you start to think about, this is our role here. So you start to think about being trust ninjas. If you are serious about pursuing a career or in this system, knowing the interface and the complexity of this, understand trust. Understand how you build trust. The 2 most important words that I have in my language, and you can understand, I'm sure I should translate this. The 2 most important words in the English language, as a friend of mine said to me, a leader of a 6th-generation family business. He said to me, Justin, there's 2 most important words. And I said, what would they be, Jim? And he said, help me. What he was saying is, I can link to trust, because by asking me, or for asking for my help, if you said to me, help me, you are showing that you are vulnerable. And the definition of trustworthiness is a willingness to be vulnerable. So by you showing that vulnerability, you're showing me that you're asking for my help. And what am I going to do? I'm going to help the guy. Help me. You don't have to go around and say, but you might say, I know my perspective on this. Can you help me understand yours? Huh? Oh. What I did was show that I'm vulnerable. You want my help? So that's building trust between you and that person. Start to think about those sorts of things, and if I had more time, I could play with some more of those things. But let me go back to what it is that I started with. I'm actually going to clean it up again and make it a little bit more clear, because I'm going to give you something else. I'm being selfish of your time. When I introduced these 3 circles, I suggested that it's been around for a while, and you'll see it at different forums such as this. But then I encourage you to look at them with a deeper understanding that yes, there are owners, and they're on a continuum between emotional attachment, psychological ownership, okay, at this end, and a pecuniary, financial objective at the other. And then I said, family of families as it evolves. And you can map that out. And these managers are managing an increasingly complex portfolio of commercial activities. You could just look back on your lives and say, well, used to be all I had to worry about was this. Now it's this, and this. And the next generation have to be prepared to understand how complex that is. Now, here's the way I like to actually give it some more texture. The owners are stewards. The managers are stewards. The family are stewards. And there's no precise translation for the word stewards in the Spanish-English translation. Think of custodians, that one generation has acted as a custodian of this business. As owners, they think of themselves as stewards, custodians that are going to pass it on to the next generation like a baton in a relay race. And the next generation see themselves as owner stewards. The managers managing on behalf, some of management, some aren't. They see themselves as stewards, custodians, selfless rather than selfish, the collective rather than the individual approach. Great work in stewardship that I've been pursuing for many years, and it makes so much sense. And the family are custodians. Our legacy is to keep Dad's legacy alive. That great work that Granddad did, that Grandma did, who pioneered this industry. That's my job. And that's the job of the greatest show on earth. If you want to be part of this, there's nothing more challenging and nothing more rewarding than being in the middle of those 3 systems that are constantly in flux. That's the greatest job on earth in the greatest show on earth. I don't want to keep you any longer, but I'll take questions. I'll give you a framework because I got a few. If you'd like me to expand, there's no problem in me doing so. But Maria, I'll call it there. My small but very quantity over quantity this afternoon. So questions, observations, criticisms.
Just a comment. Very clear and very simple approach in the very complex problem.
Thank you for paying me that compliment. It's what I endeavour to do. So, thank you. So,
On the three circles, owners, family, and management.
managers, yeah? Yeah.
I'm a little bit confused of if the family are the owners, how can we separate the ownership
It's a good question.
of the family?
It's a good question. And as it evolves, it will change. In the early days, there's significant overlap that the family are owners. You don't have any separation. But as it evolves across generation, as you pass on generations, so if you study multi-generational family businesses, you start to think, yep, in the early days, it looks like that. I'm the owner, I'm a family member, and I'm running the show. And as you expand, yes, if it's just you start to think, well, I need to have other people running the show. Yes, yes. And then you start to think, well, I have 2 kids. They are part of the family system, but they're not part of the ownership system. And you start to think about that and interpret it. But your question is quite on the point because you're looking at it, that doesn't make any sense. But it does if you start to look at the future. You start to look at and think about a time when you're not here. So I'm planning for then, 20 years from now, when how old are your children? Your children are now 10, well, they're 30, and they've got kids of their own. And you start to think, well, I've got to think about that time. A family in Asia, Hong Kong, it's Lee Kum Kee, it's an oyster sauce company. I'd encourage you to look them up. They started to they're effectively a 3rd generation family business. There was a split in the family and then they went one way. So they've got sort of a founder and then 5 siblings, okay? 4 boys and a girl, okay? And then 11 in the next generation. And they started to do governance planning, strategic planning, estate, wealth and asset planning, and talent development planning. And when they were thinking about plans, they said, well, let's not look at it as a 10-year plan. Let's look at it at a 50-year plan. Wow, 50 years from now. But then one of them said, it's wrong. And I asked them, why? Why would that be wrong? They said, because we'll still be alive. One of us, and then they were 40 years of age at the time, 50 years, we're still alive. We've got to think about a time when we're not here. So they started to think about a 100-year plan. So that changed their mindset, changed their thinking to say, okay, here, we're in this for the long run. And if you do Google Lee Kum Kee, 1,000-year plan. So they've stretched their thinking. But it's the signalling, not the message, not the actual date. We've got to start to think about what could this look like 100 years from now? 1,000's extreme. But you start to think, what about a time when we're not here? And if you're thinking about that, you're making decisions differently than what you would be when you're doing your normal planning. But it's a good question. They're overlapping now. Of course they are. I do everything. I'm the owner, I'm the family, I'm the manager. But as it expands, there's going to be a necessary to look at them separately. I'll still have roles in both, but not everyone will have roles in both. They're not yet owners. They're family. What does it require to be an owner? Different conversation. They're assuming that you're going to hand them the ownership. That's an assumption, fraught with danger. They've got to earn that and the responsibility of ownership. Whoa. It's a role and a responsibility. Yep.
Did you say something that is before the plan, the vision about the business? Where is our plan going to be 50 years from now?
Yes.
We need to create a vision.
Yes, a shared vision. To sort of align if you're starting to think about that. And that's difficult to get people. It's herding cats. It's herding cats. And the other thing I like to think about, it's easy for me to say 3 circles and 4 plans. But what I like to say is, okay, you understand it, but now you've got to come up with a plan for the plans. A plan for the plans. Now, that is the simplest thing that I have ever come up with, and I came up with it. I was mowing the grass one day, and I said, you need a plan for the plans. Because when I went through that, I got you saying, you need a what? You need a plan. You need a plan. Then you've got your 4 plans, but what do you need? A plan for the plans. So where do we need to focus on? And that's what I introduce you to, and that's what I share with the team here, this continuity canvas. To make a complex ecosystem simple. And if we had more time, you'd walk out of here saying, I got a plan for the plans. I know where to start. Because if you start and try to do everything, I'll tell you what you'll do. What'll get done? Nothing. Nothing will get done because you'll try to do everything at once. Think about it. You got to do this, 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 and this. No, you've got to prioritise and have a plan for the plans. By the end of the year, where do we need to focus on? We need a strategic plan because it's not good. We need family governance rather than business governance. So you start to think about this. As people who are students of this conversation, that's what we need. And you go back to your thing, you go 3 circles, 4 plans, and a plan for the plans. Your family members will think you've been smoking hooch. You know, what are these guys been on? Where have you been, Dad? Okay, here. We need a plan for the plans. Oh. Okay. We need to become students of this conversation. My day job is I run the company, that's the business. My nighttime job is I try and run the family. And my life's work is I try and bring these things together. You never stop. But you become passionate and ask other people how they do it. You become students. Every time you sit on an aeroplane, whoever you're sitting next to, what do? Oh, I work for my family business. And you go, oh, bingo. Ah, yeah. Have you got a governance plan? Yeah. Have you got a strategic? Yeah. By the time you get off that aeroplane, you should have all of that information. Because family members and families unite around that, and that's the mission of this institution. That you thrive together. Think about it. I can learn from you. You can learn something from me. You can share it with that guy. And I guarantee that you won't listen to your dad, but you listen to that guy up there. Huh? He said it. Who's he? Oh, he's the leader of another family business. Oh. And similarly, like your son or daughter will listen to his dad because they sort of heard your stories over and over again. So when you network together, you're learning with and from each other. You're creating a shared narrative. When you come back together, you say, gosh, they do it like this. They have a redemption policy. What the hell's that? You know, they don't let married-ins work in the business. Why not? What's their protocol look like? What are they doing?
When I created a company for my wife many years ago, she wanted me to be partners. And I told her, no partnership. I will be your consultant. You are going to be the owner.
Fantastic.
Constitutive act was very important in that sense because you need to learn how the other person is working, how you work, and what is the best arrangement legally
Sure.
to prevent harm.
Yes. To set it up structurally So it's robust. You quarantine the assets. Otherwise, when your family, your wife, something happens to your wife, well, you're exposed. You lose your house. You don't want that to happen. So they're just legal, structural points you can do. But again, you start to be thinking about these things from a business owning family perspective. Complex, interesting, intriguing, fun. So much more fun than working in the corporate world. Because what do the corporate guys do? They look after that and that. How easy is that? Compared to this? Anybody can do that. And they do. They get paid a lot of money to do that. They know what their shareholders need. They want extraordinary returns on their investments, and they do whatever it takes. Go into debt. Grab another business. Okay? Inflate the share price. Get rewarded on that. Leave in 5 years with a golden parachute, a $10 million payout. What does a family member do? A family leader stays. They're there for the long run, and their employees know it. To say, this bloke's not going to desert us. So you start to think that their mindset is different. The philosophies, the values, and that's what you need to understand coming down the pike with those 4 L's. Okay. Young man, I've picked on you enough, you may as well pick on me, huh?
So you mentioned a company that's on the 6th generation, and you mentioned the transition from generation to generation makes things more complicated every time as the family grows, everything becomes more complicated. So what's your view, what makes it, because I once read that it's not, it's difficult to make the jump from the 3rd generation to the 2nd one, and that not many companies, businesses can make the jump from the 2nd to the 3rd one. And you mentioned one that's on the 6th generation.
Yeah.
What's your view, what makes it a plan probably built, but what makes the plan succeed?
There's many things. There's many things. But let me just, if you want to stay with me for 5 more seconds, I'll just do this quickly. You may have seen this before because one of the board members here is helped me understand that. Ivan Landsberg. Here, again, I can put it on a coaster. When you ask me a question, I can give you a framework. I've got frameworks, because when the knowledge is coming to me, I'm thinking, well, how can I simply explain that? So here's the evolution. The founding owner. Some of you are generation 1. Okay? The founder. It evolves into a sibling partnership. 2 and 4. Okay? And then it becomes a cousin consortium. You with me? What I did before, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then these guys come down here and they have kids. So, founding owner, sibling partnership, cousin consortium. That's how it evolves. You'll see how. So here, G1, G2, G3. Okay? So what happens from G1 to G2? Okay? Is that we need to change, and this is what the successful families do, is we need to change the systems, the structure, the strategy, and the people. So we need to change as we're going from this guy who's made all the decisions effectively to this group of guys, in this example, 4, okay? So he didn't have to worry with too much. He checked with his wife or checked with her husband. These guys, he have to check with my sister, my 2 brothers, and before we move forward. So we've had to change the governance. This guy can't do that. This guy is used to making their own decisions. These guys are working sort of as a committee. So it's complicated. So we need to change the governance, etc., etc. Now, as we evolve, just when it settles down, the next generation have arrived.
and they're cousins. This was hard enough working with your brothers and sisters. Now there's cousins who haven't been socialised in the same house, that they've got to work together. So what needs to happen? We've got to change the systems, the structure, the strategy, and the people. Because we've got 12 of them when before we had effectively 4. 12 owners except for 4 owners? Oh, this is getting complicated. So we have to put in governance structures that make sure there's alignment. In simplest terms, I'll give you this is the quick answer. Here's the good news. If we work on our governance, if this generation and this generation has properly introduced governance to govern an increasingly complex number and diversity of owners, that we've put in these structures to report, to make sure that there's transparency, there's all the assumptions of potential conflict are out of the place. If we've put those in, if we've worked hard to think about what we need to govern that one, as we move forward as groups of cousins, because that's what they become, just cousins. They're cousins, there's this group of cousins. All we need to do, we don't have to change the systems, the structures, they're in place. The governance is in place. All we have to do is rotate the people. We prepare the people. So you're starting to think, they know their expectations, they know their roles in the business, they're preparing them to governance roles. So as we go from G3 plus, we have got solid foundation of governance and transparency and accountability in place. So you start to think, well, that's where we're headed. There's more of us. We've got cousins we don't even know. There's 30 of them, 40 of them, 50 of them. This thing's getting hard to manage. So you start to think of it like that. And that's what. And who do you learn from? If you're a G1, you learn from a G2, G3. You don't go to your other G1 buddies and say, what are you going to do? You go to somebody who's already down the track and say, what did you do? What have you got in place as a G2, G3? How do you reduce the potential for conflict? What does your planning look like? And there's one other way to think about that. And then I'm going to finish on this because otherwise Maria will say, you're hogging the microphone. This is a simpler way. That's Ivan's way to say it. And it's beautiful to use boxes and things like that. But this is my little secret. You adapt a big tent approach. A big tent approach, because you're starting to think that it's getting a little bit complicated. That we've got 3 generations of people here. Further down the track, when your grandchildren, your kids, you've set up a good business and you've got different people. Some are working in the business, but you want them in the tent. You want them in. You want to feel that they're inclusive. Not because you work in the business, you're a different class of people. No, you're part of the clan. You're my offspring. So let's take big tent approach. Let's get them all in the tent. And in the tent, and you can start to think, this tent's getting bigger. Okay, there's a lot of people. We're filling this room when we used to fill a phone box. And you go, well, this but can happen on your watch. It gets to 60. Well, that's a lot more to manage than it was when there was just 6 of you. So the big tent approach and the message to your son or your daughter saying a role in the business is an option. It could be this one. She wants to be the CEO. That's okay. Well, let's provide a pathway for you to be the best CEO. And you might say, well, I know I'm going to be an owner one day, hopefully, Dad. I'd like to be a director of the business, but I want to be a doctor. Or I want to have my own business. So here, your pathway may, within the tent, to be a director, a governor. It could be that you're going to be an entrepreneur. I want to create my own business. Can you supply some funding? I'd rather go to you than the venture capitalists because they're vultures. Right, well, we've got a venture fund for that because I was hoping that it would happen. So, or it could be that your daughter-in-law wants to get involved in the family governance because in your protocol constitution, there's no roles for married-ins to work in the business. So you start to know, as the population increases and the diversity of expectations and aspirations increase, let's give them the Big Ten approach. Here's the catch. No matter what you do, consistent with the talent development plan, that we want to assure that you and your sister and your cousin and your wife, your husband, is ready, willing, and capable to contribute in a meaningful way. Ready, willing, and capable to contribute in a meaningful way. Your wife may think that she'd like to have a role in the business on the family council. Terrific. Let's make sure she understands what that means, rather than give her a token job because she's a girl and she's married in. Let's just push them over there. No. Let them understand that this is an important glue, that the family is getting increasingly complex. And the children need to be prepared appropriately. And the way we do that, we have a family governance program. And she can understand and develop that program. She could be interested in philanthropy, or you could be interested in saving the world. Great. Let's do that in our foundation. But that foundation needs to have a strategic plan. Otherwise, we're just writing checks. Those days are over. So let's have a strategy. So if you're interested in that, let's make sure that you are ready, willing, and capable to contribute in a meaningful way. Go back to that daughter who says, I want to, a job in the business is one option, sweetheart. It's not the only option. There are other pathways. And if you want to pursue a professional career, you have my blessing. But understand that at some point in time, that there will be an opportunity for you to be a director and sit on the board of directors. But you will not be parachuted into that job just because you're my daughter and you're an owner. You will have to be appropriately prepared to contribute in a meaningful way. Ready and willing is good. Necessary but not sufficient. You need to be capable. So let's prepare you for that. Willing and capable, but if you're not ready, I'm not going to be pushing you. Ready and capable but not willing doesn't work. Ready, willing, and capable. That's how they do it. They start to think of like that in advance and say, well, this is getting big, more complicated. Let's provide options, opportunities to contribute.
There are cases that there is a black sheep.
Always.
And they need to be separated.
Always. But you'd rather them in the tent than outside the tent. You'd rather them in the tent because in the tent you can manage them. You can manage them. You can keep an eye on the rogue over there, the black sheep. I can see what he's up to. You don't, but you can. If he or she's not in the tent, where are they? Outside the tent. What are they doing outside the tent? They're lifting up the tent, listening to what's going on, sabotaging any initiative, being suspicious. I know it sounds easier to do that, but think about that. Think about, okay, what is the philosophy? You're not going to love everyone dearly, but in these events, I'll give you the reason I say that. It's not me saying that. The leader of a significant family that I have the pleasure to know in the States, he said to me, I got a cousin. Let's call him Phil, because that's his real name. Phil and I are like oil and water. Clash.
If I say it's black, he'll say it's white. He'll sabotage at every opportunity. He said, but when I started to think of it like this, I started to embrace the idea I need Phil in the tent because I know what Phil's up to. I can sort of, figuratively speaking, I can sort of go, oh, he's there. If he's not in the tent, I'm not saying it's a big tent or anything, you just know that he's part of the conversation. Let's be inclusive because he'll find a way to sabotage. And he says, even at events now, I feel more calm because, Phil, how are you, mate? Good to see you. Okay? Great that you're able to come along rather than, oh, God, there's Phil. No, he's been able to reduce the tension. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Hang in there. I'll give you other examples, but I could go on for hours. She knows. Shut him up. Close him down. Thank you.